On today's episode of Garage Noise, we're going to talk about how to prep out your primer for paint. On the last episode of Garage Noise, we prepped out this panel for primer. I showed you everything you need to know to get a good coat of primer on this so you have great results. If you missed that video, check it out. The link will be at the end of this video. So now that we have 3 good coats of primer on this panel, we need to take a few steps to make sure this panel is straight. If your panel is already straight and you're just repairing some paint, you may be able to skip this. In this case, we want to block sand this and make sure there's no waves, there's no dents or dings. Now this is a fiberglass panel, so there's not going to be any dents, but we want to make sure it's not wavy from the sanding that we did. So the first thing we're going to do is spray a guide coat on this, and this will help us find any high or low spots when blocking it out. So this is the guide coat we're going to use to spray on this panel. Now you don't want to put it on real heavy, you can just dust coat it on, and if you're interested in any of the products or tools I use, they'll be in the links in the description below. So we're going to shake it up real well, and you want to make sure you get everything covered. Oh, there's a spider. Like I said, just a dust coat. And there's a couple reasons that we're going to do this. You want to make sure it's on the entire panel, and the reason for that is you want to make sure, a couple reasons for that. You want to make sure that you sand everything. And this will help to let you know that you've got everything sanded as long as the guide coat is gone. It's also going to help you find the high and low spots on this panel. And it's especially important if you're doing body work. You want to make sure that body work's straight. And if you need information on how to straighten a dent, check out the video at the end, and that will help you out. Okay, so now we're going to start sanding this panel. There's a couple things you need to know. Blocks. Now on this panel, there's a lot of curves and contours. So we're going to need to use a short block because it's going to be hard to use a real long block on this because it's not going to sit flat against the panel. So we're going to be using a small block. Now there's a couple different ones. This one's very flexible, and I'm going to use this to go around these curves. And then I'm going to use this one it's still flexible, but it's a little stiffer. I'm going to use this for the flat areas. But if you had a panel that was straight, it was just a big straight panel, you could use a longer block with some 320 on it. Now I didn't mention 320 is what we're going to be using on this. 320 can be painted right over. Now, I would not recommend it. I always like to go with a 600 to finish it before we paint. But we're going to start with 320 to get this panel straight and get this primer straight. So I'm going to start blocking here, and you can see I have my guide coat on here, and I'm just going to block it in an X pattern. Follow the contours. You don't want to use your hand when you're blocking. You always want to use a block. It's always better to use a block. So you can start to see how this is developing. This is a high spot here, this is a low spot here, and what we're doing is we're blocking that primer flat. So we're going to keep blocking until that guide coat disappears. Now if we were to break through into the fiberglass, or in your case maybe metal, then you're going to want to stop and you may have to re-primer. See how the guide coat in the center is disappearing there? Okay, see how the guide coat, there's a little bit of black there, and now it's starting to disappear. So there's a low spot right here. Now let me block that out, and then I'll show you what it looks like after I block it out. Following the contours of the body. Left. There's a little bit of shadow there, but you can see there's just little remnants of it left. So we're straightening out the panel. Now I'm going to block sand this entire panel, and I'll show you the results. Okay, let me give you a pro tip here. Blocking this is definitely the way to go. Now, There is a way to block with a DA, and I'm going to show you that. I would recommend you block it first, even if you're just going over to see lightly to see if there's any high and low spots, okay? And then you could go over it with a DA to finish it. Okay, and this is only going to work real well on flat spots. Now this is relatively flat. You need to be able to hold the DA flat. And this is a dual action sander. I have some 320 grit sandpaper on here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna run the DA and we're gonna do it in a crisscross pattern, okay? And that should show you the highs and low spots throughout this panel here. So as you can see, it's exposed a few little low spots right here. Now, these low spots are really not anything major at all. They're gonna sand out very easily. This panel is very straight, but this gives you an idea of what you can expect to see. And this is the guide coat in this low area. So you just continue blocking it. So this area right here, this little curvature, is a hard place to sand with a block. So what we're gonna use is this flexible block, and we're gonna lay it in there to the contour of it, and then we're just gonna sand it like this. So that's just a little tip to get a good straight finish. Okay, so now that we've completed the blocking portion of this job, we have a nice blocked out panel. Now, we have sanded through a few spots that I want to go around, and I want to hit it with some general purpose primer. That's why this is handy to have around, this aerosol can. You don't have to mix up any primer, and I can touch up some areas that need primed. So during the blocking process, you might notice some imperfections in your surface, a chip, a nick, a scratch. So at this point, this is when you want to take care of those, and you might fill those with a little poly putty and then sand those smooth with some 320. Contoured areas where you couldn't get a typical block, what I would use is a scuff pad and a piece of 320, and I would sand in those areas. All in this crack here, we sanded with 320, and I just folded a piece of 320 in half and sand it in that groove. Now what we need to do is we need to go over this entire panel with 600 grit. You can use 600 on an orbital sander, so you could use a DA. So if you weren't concerned about making sure this panel is absolutely straight and you were more concerned about time, you could use a DA and some 600 and sand this entire panel. So if that was the case, what I would recommend you use is a DA with an interface pad on it. And this is just a soft foam pad that goes on your DA, and then the sandpaper goes on top of that. That's going to give a little bit of give, so when you're going around contours and things of that nature, it's not going to dig in and create flat spots. Okay, so check it out. It's a big difference from where we started. It's very smooth. It's ready for paint, sanded with 600 wet dry paper. Just gives it a nice smooth finish. I appreciate you watching. If you want to build your skill and increase your knowledge, start now by subscribing to the channel and clicking that bell. We'll see you next time.